Buffalo Schools. So today, we will be hosting the Elmwood Village Charter School Days Park renewal. And with that, I will pass the torch to Dr. Ebony Bullock.
Good afternoon, Madam Vice President and my esteemed board members. As Dr. Kathy Evans-Brown has said, before us today is our good friends over at Elmwood Village Charter Schools. It's the Days Park campus, and they are up for renewal. Hopefully you have a copy of their presentation in your email. If not, we will make sure that you do have one. We have Director Brad Behringer here, who's taking copious notes as always. We have a robust team of 5 here from EVCS Days Park. And as always, we have Chief Staff Dr. Caresses and our Chief Counsel Mary Scarpine. And with that, EVCS friends, we want you to know that you'll have approximately 15-ish, 20-ish minutes to present, and then we will take questions and comments, concerns from our board and from the viewing public. Just so you are clear, we do have a chat, so if there are folks at home watching, they're able to write their questions, comments, concerns in the chat, and then our friends in the back over here behind the fourth wall, they will let us know if there's any questions from the viewing public. Okay?
Thank you. My name is Liz Evans. I am the Director of Operations at the Elmwood Village Charter Schools. We also have 4 other members of our team here with us today. We have David Phillips, who is our principal at our Days Park campus. We have Ann Wexler, who is our Director of Curriculum and Instruction at both schools.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Hi.
Is my sound okay? Or?
Just telling you.
Yes, hold on one second. Colleagues, if we could be mindful that we're all muted, we have started the presentation. Thank you.
Okay. And we also have Danielle Bruno. She's our Director of Schools at both campuses. And we also have Kathy Franklin Adams, who's a founding board member and represents both schools as well. So thank you for hosting us. We have, it is our renewal for Days Park. We were approached by our authorizer, which is SUNY, to, instead of a usual 5-year renewal, to do a full term 2-year renewal is how they put it, so that we can then align future renewals with the EVCS Hurdle campus. So we're going to be back here again in 2 years, presenting for both campuses next time. So, next slide. A little bit about EVCS Days Park. EVCS Days Park is a diverse, high-performing K-8 charter school in Buffalo, New York. Our chartered enrollment is 450 students in grades, as I said, K-8. So, Days Park is in its 18th year of operation. It's a grassroots charter school that's founded by 6 community members, 2 of whom are in the room, myself and Ann Wexler, both founders of the school. Next slide, please. I've written out our mission statement for you, the EVCS Days Park mission statement. Elmwood Village Charter Schools will provide a stimulating and engaging learning environment that recognizes student capability, fosters their connectedness to their immediate and broader communities, and offers them ways to contribute to school life. EVCS believes that all students can and will learn at high levels when provided with the right learning conditions. And next slide, we have our vision statement. EVCS graduates will have the confidence to pursue their unique aspirations and act with agency to contribute to their local community and beyond. Next slide, please. I presented some of the key design elements for EVCS Days Park. We are a small K-8 community. We have a low student-teacher ratio with 2 to 3 adults in each classroom. We have a longer daily schedule and more time on task with double blocks of ELA and math for students. Our emphasis is on social and emotional learning throughout the entire school. And we have a diverse student community from all neighborhoods in Buffalo. Next slide, please. Our academic programs are outlined here. We use Zern Math for our K-5 grade levels and Desmos for 6th through 8th. We have also a Do the Math intervention program that we use. We have really great reading for foundational skills. We use wit and wisdom for K through 3, and the Teach Like a Champion Reading Reconsidered in grades 4 through 8. We use Responsive Classroom as our SEL program and Fly 5 SEL curriculum. And we use Mystery Science for K through 5 grade levels and Amplify Science for 6th grade and then 7th and 8th is it's what? It's still Amplify, okay. Glad you're here to help me out. Next slide, please. I haven't put a slide together on the next slide. It's very busy, so I just wanted to outline what's in there. It's we have our economically disadvantaged population, students with IEPs and 504 plans with the type of classification that the students have. We have a racial and ethnic and gender breakdown, and our number of students classified as English language learners, or ENL students. So next slide, please. So you can see our enrollment is on the left, the number of grade levels. The next one in blue is our economically disadvantaged percentage. The next 14.1 is percent with an IEP, and we have 25 students with a 504 plan and 6 ENL students. So you can see in the chart there on the left, that's sort of the visual breakdown of our different groups. So you can see it's a diverse, truly diverse school population. And we have the students, percentage of students by disability. It says there the type of disability they're classified with. So hopefully you'll be able to read that if you have the actual print of the handout. And our gender breakdowns and the number of students in each grade level. So, next slide, please. The next slide, you asked for proficiency data. We have it broken down. This first slide is the ELA, New York State assessment. And the first lighter blue bar is all public schools in New York State. And then the darker blue bar to the right is Elmwood Village Charter School Days Park. And you can see that the little graph to the right is the trend over time from 2017-18 to last year, 22-23. So you can see the how we've done over time of the charter. Next slide, please. And the next slide is our math assessment. The light blue bar is all public schools in New York State, and then the dark blue bar is Elmwood Village Charter School Days Park. And you can see on the right the trend over time. The 2021 school year is the low point for COVID nadir. So, next slide, please. And you also asked for student retention year over year. So we have 3 years of number of students that returned to EVCS. 2021, we had 89% that came back. 2021, we had 87.8%. And 22-23, we had 81% that returned to EVCS. Next slide. You also asked for the number of students returned to the district. So we look back at our data, and we have had 4 students that have been reclassified by the CSC, and families chose to move them to a more restrictive setting. We had 1 student that was expelled, and all the other students that left it was due to parental choice. They moved to a different school district, a different state, a different criterion school. So that was the parents' and families' decision to move their students. Next slide, please. The next you asked for staff demographics. So we have here, this is this bar here is all of our instructional staff. We have 29.9%. This includes teachers and teaching assistants, which are actually true classroom partners. They take over for the lead teacher if the lead teacher is out, and they lead instruction in certain areas. So they're true partners in the teaching process. So, and then non-people of color, 67.5, and then there's some that decline to identify either way. Next slide, please. Yeah, thank you. So we also were asked about a financial overview. The balance of cash that Elmwood Village Charter School has on the books and records is $6,744,616. This is from our accountant, so I wouldn't put the dollar to the dollar, but EVCS owns 2 buildings and owes mortgages on both of them. EVCS received no funding for the acquisition or renovation of facilities, so we purchased our building through a mortgage through a bank, which we still hold debt on both of our buildings. We don't get preferred rates on utilities. Some other public districts also receive, so another consideration. Next slide. Excuse me. So some of the ways that we use our reserve, we have a reserve for capital improvements that has been established in the amount of $2,600,000 so that future significant repairs and large capital improvements can be addressed without having to borrow more money. We have a reserve for operations of the Elmwood Village Charter Schools in the amount of $3,500,000, and this amount represents 90 days of our operating cash. So we have 90 days worth of cash on hand. And then the remainder of the reserves is held in case of dissolution as required by our statute by our authorizer, and for emergency repairs or unanticipated or unbudgeted costs. So next slide is just our conclusion. Thank you for your time, and I welcome any questions that you have, and if anyone can answer it better than me, I'll invite them up to help me out.
So, Madam Vice President, Dr. Kathy Evans Brown, this concludes their presentation, and they have opened it up for questions. Right now, as of 4:12, Naomi, do we have any questions in the chat? Not at the, so as of 4:12, Madam Vice President, we don't have any question, comments, or concerns from the public in the chat.
Okay, well, thank you so much for that fine presentation. Thank you, Dr. Bullock. I see a number of my colleagues are here on the panel, and I must say that EVCS is one of my favorite charters. I'm putting that out there publicly. And I remember when that initiative started 18 years ago, because one of my children was going to go, and the only reason I didn't send them was because of transportation. But anyhow.
Which we now have, but we didn't back then, it's true. Yeah.
Oh, you have transportation now?
We do now, yes.
Oh, wonderful.
Yes.
All right, so any board members have any questions for this team? I don't see any formal hands. And I see a number of my colleagues here. All right, board member Shuda, you're up.
Hello, good afternoon, and thank you for the presentation. What I'm looking for, and I see that you have the breakdown of the students that return to the Buffalo schools, and you've listed that they're going to our criteria-based. Is there some way we could have a more specific? I'm not sure if none of them are returning to regular non-criteria-based schools. So I think there were, at some point, because we're hearing from our school leaders that we have such an influx of kids from charters, and I'm just wondering if you're.
Mary, you're on mute. I think you switched.
Thanks. So many of our kids from charters do join us at City Honors and our criteria base. So that's something that I would be interested at some point of seeing a breakdown of that.
We track that. They only want to come up here. You have to come up here and talk into the mic.
Okay, North Park Community School. I've had a couple kids.
Okay, our director of curriculum and instruction says we also have had some students that have gone to the North Park Community School.
Okay.
Which is on Parkside. So
right.
I don't think that's a criterion school.
No, that's only regular.
Yeah, that's the only other school that there's also charter schools. Sometimes they'll choose to send them to their charter schools, but that's not the district. So.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, but I can give you a little more. I can look back in our information and get that to you as best I can. Sure.
Okay, thank you so much.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Okay, any other questions? All right, Board Member Paulette Woods.
Elmwood Charter is also one of my favorite schools. I remember touring them. And you do what a charter school is supposed to do. Try innovative methods and things that can be tried out at a smaller scale in your schools, and that if they're positive, we can adopt them into the Buffalo public schools to benefit our students. So I'm interested in that you said you're able to do double blocks
Yes.
of ELA and math,
Yes.
and that you also have an emphasis on social emotional learning throughout the whole school. Can you elaborate on that? I love to listen to see what I can pick up.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to ask our Director of Curriculum and Instruction to come in because she's the best person to talk about that. So she knows everything inside and out. So it's Ann Wexler.
Hello. We have a longer school day. So that enables us to have 2 40-minute blocks for ELA, and then we actually have an additional 40-minute block for small group reading. So really that's 120 minutes total of ELA a day. And then we do 80 minutes of math a day. And so, the benefit of that obviously is it allows us to do whole group instruction and then pull into small groups and do a lot of differentiation. In terms of the SEL programs, since we were founded, we started out as a responsive classroom school. So that's a whole school model that it sort of starts with the belief that in order for kids to be successful academically, they also need to be successful socially and emotionally, and those things really go hand in hand. They have to have those skills in order to be successful learners, and that we need to explicitly teach them. Not every kid is going to come to school with that readiness, and we need to spend time in our schools supporting their growth in that area. So, that looks a lot of, it kind of appears in a lot of different ways in our school, from things like whole school morning meeting, morning meetings in every classroom, which I know a lot of schools do. There's a very particular emphasis with the responsive classroom morning meeting around community building, and then, that really building that welcoming community. But then it's also around teacher language. So, really trying to build intrinsic motivation in students. So we don't use a PBIS system. We don't do whole class kinds of management systems in that way. We want kids to learn to be intrinsically motivated. We do sometimes have behavior plans for individual students who might need more regular reinforcement and something more concrete, but for the most part, we want kids to learn how to self-regulate and learn to monitor their own behaviors rather than it sort of being a top-down teacher-driven system. It's things like students contributing to working together to build the classroom rules, having the classroom contract that we constantly refer back to. It also has a lot to do with how we discipline kids. So we, spend a ton of time training our teachers in responsive classroom, and it's really focused around logical consequences. You break it, you fix it. You hurt someone's feelings, you're going to have a problem-solving conversation with that person and apologize. You knock the blocks down, you're going to help them rebuild. And then as they get older, obviously that looks different. But really that idea of the consequences should match whatever it is that, whatever the rule was that was broken, so that kids can learn from that, and that they're as connected as possible. I don't know, anything else?
Can you elaborate with the board? What is your start and time so they know what you mean by a longer school day?
Yeah, so our school day starts officially at 8:05 and ends officially, our dismissal starts at 3:05. So that's the academic days, 8:05 to 3:05.
Oh, that's pretty good. Thank you for that detailed explanation. And I noticed that, I think I noticed that there was one expulsion at your school. Is that pretty accurate?
Yes.
That's phenomenal. Okay, so we have other questions from President Sharon Copman, followed by Board Member Terrence Hurd.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. The student that was expelled, where did he go? Where did you send him to?
I don't know we didn't send him. I don't know where he ended up. I could find out, but.
Okay. And so in your charter school network, do you have any plans on keeping your children who are expelled or who are misbehaving? I understand there's a network of charters that have organized, and I'm curious to know why, if a child was expelled, you don't know where he went. No disrespect, but certainly we have an idea where he ended up.
I'm being told it was Lackawanna.
Okay, he went to Lackawanna.
Yeah.
Yes.
He was
So
a resident.
you take students from Lackawanna as well?
If they get in while they're in the district and they move out of the district, they're still allowed to attend EBCS as a returning student.
All right. Okay, because I'm like Terry Shooter. I wanted to know the total numbers of students that were returned. I wasn't quite clear when you did your special ed PowerPoint piece. If you can bring it back up. I wasn't quite sure how many students you were talking. Is it just a total of 25, or were there 25 that had a 504 plan? I couldn't quite understand the total number.
Yeah, it's 15.1% with an IEP, and then 25 students with a 504. So it's a percentage, and then the other one's a number. So
what? I'm sorry, I came in a little late. So what is your total enrollment?
Well, it was 439. It's 439 currently.
So does the 15.1% include the 25 students with the 504 or not?
Well, the 14.1 is that's the number of students with IEPs, and then there's an additional 25 students with 504 plans. So those are both and numbers.
Okay, so that takes you to that. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
I have history with Elmwood Village Charter, and I don't have any ill feels toward Elmwood Village Charter. I think you guys do a pretty decent job. I'm curious to know, I'm being told that you're interested in moving from being under the Board of Regents umbrella to the SUNY umbrella. And from our perspective, is that true or not?
Well, we actually already did that because we opened our Hurdle School under SUNY, and then we merged the two schools under SUNY. So now we're both under SUNY as our authorizer.
Okay, so you're both. Why did you do that? I'm just curious. Because from our perspective, SUNY is very lenient. And most of the schools, and SUNY has also had the majority of the students that have left, that have closed over the years. So I was curious to know why you identified with them. It's curious. It was.
I mean, we find them to be a mission-driven organization. They're very supportive. When we have, questions or we need advice or need like guidance or suggestions. So they're very
lenient too. They're very lenient, and they don't require the same things that New York, I like that for the record, that the Board of Regents requires from their people either. So good luck with that. I'm sure there's a reason for it. Other than that, your reserves. I wasn't sure if the repairs and the capital improvements, as well as your 90-day cash reserve, were included in the 6-point-something million, or is that in addition to?
No, that's the amount. That's what we have, the 6 million plus in reserve total.
Okay. So are you planning on opening up a third campus?
I think we're all too tired to do that. So no, it's not in the plans at all.
Okay.
We're trying to make our two schools the best they can be. So.
All right. Thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank
you. Okay. Then we have Terrence Hurd.
Yes. Thank you for your presentation, and thank you for really giving us a larger insight of what your program has to offer. I too, I'm on the bandwagon. I really do like the program over there. Many times I visited, I just see great things happening, and congratulate you guys on building a successful charter here in the city of Buffalo. Just have a question. I was at some connectivity issues. I was in and out. But if we can, what are you having a summer program also?
We do not offer a summer program. No, we do send some of our kids to, we have a partnership with Best Self Behavioral Health. So they have an after-school program. We refer students to Say Yes programs that are available to students in the city of Buffalo. So we inform our parents about what's available. We don't provide summer programs for them.
Okay. So those are programs that the Buffalo Public Schools actually help support also.
Yeah, I think that Best Self gets funding from Say Yes. Yeah.
Yes. So yeah, I'm just looking at those aspects to see what you guys were doing for a summer program, and also I do know that you have a very, very large parent group that is associated with you also. We receive calls as a board, from the parents and things that's going on over there. So continue with the good work. And I just want to inquire about the summer program because we're looking to house our students also in the Buffalo Public Schools, make sure we have enough room. And also, those obligations we have to Say Yes and making sure they put a great product out. So we thank you so much.
Thank you.
Can I just, for the record, can you tell me where your locations are?
Sure. Our Days Park campus is in the Allentown neighborhood. It's kind of tucked away at the end of Allen Street. So where Allen makes a right, if you go straight, right, that's Days Park. And our Hurdle campus is on Hurdle between Military and Elmwood. So it's right near the D District Police Station.
Okay, thank you for that. Here's another comment, Board Member Shuda.
I'm just wondering how many people who put in applications that you don't have spaces for? Like, do you have? I know you have a lottery, but how? Like, the demand. I'm not sure what the demand is.
Yeah, it varies by grade level, and we have spots varying by grade level. Like in our kindergarten, that's when we have the most spots available because we have all of our students moving up to first grade. So, but we do also have sibling preference. So siblings of current students get preference for those spots. Then we do have another sort of group of spots at fifth grade when we have kids leaving for Olmsted or City Honors or, different criterion schools. So it depends on the grade level, but we have a wait list at every grade level.
Okay, thanks so much for the information. Thank you, thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, so thank you, Terry. Board Member Scott?
Board Member Scott, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Thank you. Thank you, Vice President Evans Brown. Thank you for the presentation. I just want to commend you on your transparency in the presentation that you provided. I feel like the last time you presented to us, you were also very transparent about your data and answering the board and district questions that we submit. So just want to commend you on answering all those questions and with transparency. It's similar to Board Member Shuda's question. Just wondering if over the years, you've been established for several years, over the years as other charter schools have opened up, and you mentioned like North Park Community School drawing students, what has been the, have you seen a decline in applications? Have you had any struggles in filling seats at times?
Yes, I'm sure you're all aware of the demographic changes that are happening all over the place with the birth rates declining. So there's fewer applicants for kindergarten, that age group, kindergarten and first grade. So we've definitely seen a decline in the applications in those lower grade levels. So I think that's probably a consequence of more charter schools, lower birth rates, people deciding to homeschool their kids. I'm not sure exactly why, but we have the New York Charter School Association did a demographic study in New York State. So I'd be happy to share that with you if you're interested, but it was very informative as to like the trend of birth rates.
Yeah, I would be interested in seeing that for sure.
Sure.
Thank you for answering my question. That is all for me.
Okay. Oh, Dr. Bullock, I do not see any other questions from my colleagues here on the panel. And I don't have any more, so I'm gonna shoot it back to you.
Thank you. Naomi, do we see any comments or questions from the viewing public? So as of 4:30, we still don't have any comments from the live stream chat. So with that, we will go ahead and conclude this meeting. Esteemed board members, we will work with EVCS to get those items that you requested. They will come to Director Behringer, and we will pass them on to you. And I think that is it, unless if any of you have any additional information that you'd like to share with the board.
Thank you for your time today. Thank you very much for your questions.
So,
I'm sorry, Dr. Bullock,
Yes.
the demographics of the school, was that shared?
Yeah.
That I saw the demographics of I may have missed that. Can you make sure that I received that, please? And the
Yes.
and the staff that you had, the 29.9, that includes your workers in your cafeterias, right?
No, it's only instructional staff. It's teachers and teaching assistants who I said they're true partners in the classroom. So
okay,
sure,
and
know.
so
Yeah.
I'm sorry if I missed your presentation on the demographics of the students. I so keep that for my records, okay?
Yeah.
President Cotman, if you have the slides, it is slide 8, our page 4, but we will make sure we'll send you a summary of that slide. Just a point of clarification for the board, from our friends at EVCS, your slide 9 and 10 are page 5, your New York State assessment data, that is all testing grades, yes?
Yes.
Okay, so for my esteemed board members, if you look on your PowerPoint, page 5, slides 9 and 10, that information that does not have a testing grade breakdown. So you don't see 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. It's all of it together as a combined proficiency rate.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So again, we will send the items. As I said, Director Behringer was taking copious notes, including your questions, and we will make sure that we send you exactly what you requested. For our friends at EVCS, our typical process from here is that we will send to SUNY and the charter school office a copy of Brad's notes, your sign-in sheet, and your presentation. We also send a copy of what the board has requested, and then we will follow up with whatever we share with the board. We will also share it with the CSO and SUNY. And if you have any questions, you can contact Brad. I know one of you have been talking to Brad or myself, but usually Brad is easier to get a hold of. Not that his job isn't big and busy. He's usually easier to get a hold of. So, Dr. Evans-Brown and esteemed board members, this concludes the charter school hearing for renewal for Elmwood Village Charter School Days Park.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good job.
Thank
You
you.
guys are fine.
Thank
See you at 5.
Making it very easy.
Thank you.
Terrence, your video is still on. Hi, Terry.
Hello, Paulette. How are you?
I'm blessed, darling. It's good to see your face.
Thank you. You as well.
I just did 8 hours in my garden yesterday. 8 hours today. Well,
Wow.
yes, yesterday, the day before. So I'm sitting down today because my back hurt.
Oh my gosh.
All right, good evening, everyone, and Chairperson Shuda, good evening. We are ready for you to gavel us into session, and the superintendent is in Albany meeting today, so we are going to proceed whenever you'd like to start.
Okay, if everyone's ready, first of all, I want to thank everyone for attending. I think that there will be some great information. There has been a lot of discussion and a lot of dialogue in the community regarding the BPS volunteer policy regulations and now the formalized handbook. So I'm wondering, Dr. Crestis, would you like to lead us off, or would we just go right to the presentation?
Well, I can certainly have the pleasure of introducing Chief Jesenowski and Dr. Reynolds. They're going to lead us through their PowerPoints. I can turn things over to them.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
So thank you very much. Good evening. In Dr. Williams' absence, good evening, Dr. Kretzy, honorable board members, colleagues, and listening audience. You know, as a district, we diligently strive to provide top-tier academic, social, emotional, and enrichment supports for our students. It's a monumental task that's impossible to do alone. As such, we lean upon the goodwill and support provided by volunteers. Next slide, please. Chief Jesenowski and I are pleased to share with you proposed revisions to School Volunteer Policy 3150. We will also share updates to Regulation 3150, and for the first time for our district, the new BPS Volunteer Handbook. This handbook is intended to provide standardized district-wide volunteer expectations and processes. It also addresses a need that both our superintendent and board presidents speak a lot about, and that's ensuring that systems are in place to make certain that work is sustainable as individuals transition to new roles. Next slide, please. As we are all aware, all work is undergirded by our district's overarching 5 by 2025 goals and supported by the moving to the next level tenets. Next slide, please. So as a collective, we also have the responsibility to work towards the achievement of our 3 district goals and look for volunteers to support fulfillment of the goals. Next slide, please. Last summer, a committee was established to review and update the current policy, regulation, and develop a handbook draft. This effort was led by Family and Community Engagement Director, Dr. Jennifer Rich, and FACE Supervisor, Dr. Danielle Gray, along with representation from our board-recognized parent groups, BPS school leaders, Office of School Leadership, Legal Department, Human Resources, and Office of Shared Accountability. Jason Joyce from the Instructional Technology Department has been instrumental with setting up the online application and back-end approval processes. Additionally, these documents were shared, we addressed questions, received feedback during assistant principal and community stakeholder meetings. An online portal was also established by FACE, and we received vigorous feedback. Many recommendations are reflected in the documents that we're sharing today. Next slide, please. Chief Jesenowski will now provide an overview of Policy 3150 revisions.
Admir, one more slide, please. Thank you. Good evening, board members, colleagues, and listening audience. I would like to review the revised policy draft tonight with you, following all the feedback we received from our stakeholders. So as you can see in our policy, volunteers are people who are willing to donate their time and energies to assist principals, teachers, and other personnel in implementing various phases of school or district programs. The board has a volunteer program to support district instructional and extracurricular activities. The purpose of the volunteer program is to enrich student learning opportunities, provide opportunities for our diverse community to engage with and support our schools and district, create opportunities for widespread engagement, goodwill, and meaningful service, advance student outcomes. So what is the process for becoming a volunteer? A volunteer can complete an application either electronically or in person. The application is then submitted to the principal or department lead, the ASL, and ends with the superintendent for consideration. Next slide, please, Admir. So what is in our current policy in comparison to what our proposed changes will be? In our current policy, liability protection under the district's insurance program is the language that is used. We'd like to change the language to liability protections are required by law. For our current policy program purpose, assist employees in providing more individualized and enrichment of instruction, build an understanding of school programs among interested citizens, thus stimulating widespread involvement in the total educational process, strengthen school community relations through positive participation. Our proposed changes are the following for program purpose: enrich learning opportunities, provide opportunities for our diverse community to engage with and support our schools and district, create opportunities for widespread engagement, goodwill, and meaningful service, and advance student outcomes. Currently, our application process is only in person, and it goes to the principal and superintendent for approval. What we're proposing is the application can be online or in person. It goes then to the principal, department lead, ASL, and then to the superintendent. Dr. Reynolds will now present a regulation 3150 and the volunteer handbook. Next slide, please.
Thank you very much, Chief Jezanowski. So the policy is the what. The regulation denotes how the policy will be implemented. Next slide, please. The regulation only has a few updates. Now, historically, volunteer applications could only be completed online, but beginning next school year, as Chief Jezanowski has already said, individuals will be able to complete the application either in person or online. And based upon feedback, we've also inserted important language to the regulation that includes a BPS employee always being present when volunteers are working with students, volunteers providing support but not primary coverage for classes, lunch, recess, etc. Volunteers may not supervise students. Volunteers may not be permitted to take or share pictures or videos of students. Also, New York State fingerprint clearance and background checks will now be required for out-of-state and overnight activities. These additions are also included in the handbook. Next slide, please. So I won't read through the handbook, but I will share a few highlights. Next slide, please. This first page highlights volunteer opportunities, goals, some of the types of services, defines volunteer, as well as what it means to volunteer in our district. It's important to note that volunteers are not compensated. It's also important to note that volunteer services must align to the school or district goals. Next slide, please. These pages provide information on the application process, as well as details for obtaining fingerprint clearance and background checks for volunteers who will accompany schools on overnight or out-of-state field trips. Individuals who are interested in volunteering will need to complete a waiver agreeing to adhere to our district's code of conduct. Additionally, the cost for fingerprint clearance and background checks will be absorbed by the sponsoring school or department and not the volunteer. Details pertaining to volunteer, school, and district expectations, procedures, and guidelines are also provided. We want the experience to be positive and rewarding for the volunteers, staff, and students. Schools will provide badges for volunteers. Volunteers will meet with a school or department designee prior to service to review goals, create a schedule, and review and discuss the contents of this handbook, as well as other important details. Next slide, please. The remaining pages of the handbook share information regarding student confidentiality, student photos, reporting suspected abuse or neglect, withdrawing from service, providing feedback. Next slide, please. And we also included a copy of the volunteer application. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. And so this concludes our high-level overview of Policy 3150 regulations, as well as the new handbook. And we welcome questions and feedback at this time.
Okay, thank you so much for their presentation. And I see that President Koppman, you have your hand up.
Thank you for your presentation. Can we go back to the regulations, please, and read those?
Sure. And are you able to share the screen again? And if not, I can share them with you. Okay.
Yeah. Because for whatever reason, when I'm on life size, I have a hard time navigating the other side of the equation. But you had the regulations. I wanted to see the regulations is what I'm concerned.
Next slide. Continue.
Okay. There we are.
Now, do you want that, or do you want the actual changes? Okay. Mm-hmm.
No, that's what. Wait a minute. You want this regulation has been changed?
So next slide, please, Mr. Etner.
Excuse me.
So on the left side, there were very few changes to the regulation. On the right side is where you see the draft revisions. So that first one really is just denoting that we now have an online application process in addition to the in-person. And then these are some of the additions, and that includes, and this was not in our or the current regulation, and that is that BPS employee must be with students at all times, that volunteers are not able to provide primary coverage. So they can be in a room, they can help with classrooms, but they're not able to be there alone with students, either during class, lunch, or recess. They can't be asked to supervise students. They're not permitted to take or share pictures or videos of students. And then that new addition is that the New York State fingerprint clearance is required for out-of-state and overnight activities at no cost to the volunteer, though.
Okay. All right. So question.
Mm-hmm.
Will a background check be done on the volunteers?
Only on those who are participating in out-of-state or overnight activities.
So I'm a child pedophile. I volunteer to come in your school. There's no way to find out who that is? There's no way to verify a name check or anything?
The fingerprint clearance is what would is where that would register.
but I'm not doing out of state, nor am I doing overnight.
And that is exactly why you are in the presence of a BPS staff member. So you would never be alone with a child.
Okay. So that doesn't work for me. That doesn't
Okay.
work. Okay. The least we can do is a name check on anyone. Human resource, I'm sure, has that ability. The least we could do is a name check on anyone who is going to be exposed to our children. The other thing that I think is missing, and I appreciate the work you did on this. I know it's very difficult. We saw that ourselves, to get people out to support you, to support these events. It takes a lot out of staff or whatever. And I want to say that because people automatically assume that this work is just put together and there are no not enough input pulled together to do it, and that's not true. The other thing that I think needs to be added in here is that volunteers will not have additional contact with children outside of this build, outside of BPS. We need that.
It's in here, Board President.
Is that under the regulation?
Yeah, it's in the handbook and it's in the regulation.
Okay, good. Now my other question is, how do you know that the person has read the handbook?
I mean,
in other words, you give them the handbook, because here's how it works in corporate America. Okay, I would be put in front of a computer. Okay, and hopefully this work has been translated into multiple languages, and I would have to go through a checklist of things that I would have to do in order to be onboarded. And one of them would include me reading a manual and making sure, or the book, that I understood, and I would have to sign off that I understood what I just read. Okay, and so I think it's important that we, have that in place, that people, it's not. You said it was a very thin manual, if I remember right. It's not thick at all. Or you can have an orientation class. And then in your orientation class, people can sign off. It doesn't have to be individual or whatever. But I'm
sorry to interrupt you. That the attestation is in there. It's a part of the handbook.
Okay.
It is. The print is a little too small, but there is an attestation where they're doing exactly what you're saying. And keep in mind also that the volunteer is going to be meeting either with the principal or principal designee. If they're volunteering in a department, they're meeting with the department lead. Those individuals are also, because we don't want to even just take it for granted. We are going through the components of the handbook with the individuals. But it is a spot where they are checking off that they've read it, that they adhere to the district code of conduct, that they, let me put my glasses on, the print is kind of small here. I will adhere to school and district policies, including the district code of conduct. I will adhere to all additional school or department rules and expectations. I will maintain confidentiality. I won't read it all, but it's there. So the attestation is there.
Now, what about, great. What about multiple languages?
We will. So we have a little time because this won't go into effect until the next school year. So we absolutely will be sharing so that we can get the handbooks translated into the top languages.
And who keeps the signed paperwork from the parent? From the volunteer. Who keeps that? Who keeps the record of it?
So it depends upon where they are volunteering. First, we'll have an online portal. Okay, so we will have folders that is accessible to district staff. And so we want to, rather than keep, because our chief liability officer is sharing with us that we want to kind of move away from the hard copies. So we will have that saved online. And that's the portal that IT has set up for us.
Wait a minute, who's recommending that we don't have hard copies after going through an IT breach?
Well, I'm sorry, that we're moving away from having hard copies of signed documentation to protect the personal information. And so we will have an online portal. We'll have an online system and portal that will be accessible to district and school staff.
Okay, so can you get back with me on the name check situation, because I'm very concerned about that. Okay. Okay, so thank you for taking my questions, and thank you for the work you're doing.
You're welcome.
Mr. Hurd, I saw your hands up. Mr. Hurd?
Can you hear me? Hello?
Okay, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Thank you for your presentation, Dr. Reynolds, and thank you, Chairwoman, for bringing me on to the table. I would like to ask a couple of questions. Is there a questionnaire that our volunteers have to fill out before they can work with the district? The reason why I ask that is because I would like to know more about, why they want to volunteer and work with children and what programs they'll be working with. So is there any type of questionnaire so we can have identify, just like when the district hire personnel, that they vet them first, just to make sure that they a good fit for the district before we bring anybody on that's just say, I passed a background check and a fingerprint?
Well, not necessarily a questionnaire, but we do have an application process or an application that they complete.
There's an application, but is there specific questions about why you want to volunteer with children, or have you worked with children in the past, or are you like a former educator, or what's your reason in the department that you want to work with children for?
The application does not specifically ask why. It does ask questions pertaining to, where they're at, where they're interested in volunteering, their relationship or interest to the Buffalo Public Schools, so that we know whether they're a parent or caregiver, a family member, community member, or other. And so, no, we don't ask them why.
I really think, I don't know if the board would agree with this or not, but I really think that it's a good idea to have a questionnaire to reason and kind of vet why the individual want to be in the school. And the goal is to protect our children. And there's many reasons why, a pedophile would, find ways to be interactive with children. And we just want to make sure we got the right temperament inside the buildings to protect, our children and staff members.
Okay, so ask them why they're interested in volunteering. Got it.
Right. They should be in depth, not just like a checkbox. They should really have to write out why they want to work with the children, and so that we can, get a better understanding, who's in our building and what experience do they have working with children. Another question is this volunteer basis. As I look at our sports programs, we have a lot of coaches that volunteer coaching. How is that set up here? Does this come under the 3150 for those assistant coaches or those individuals that volunteer with the sports programs?
That's a separate process. It's different documentation that's required.
Okay. And everything else follows under the code of conduct then. So with these, say you said no videos or no pictures being taken of students, but are they allowed to use cell phones inside the buildings?
Are they allowed to use cell phones in terms of?
I would like for our volunteers not to be able to have, use cell phones inside the building, that if they volunteering, that if they need to speak with somebody, just how we ask our students to do is to go to a teacher and then go to the office or to an area.
Okay.
And also follow.
If they have to use, I'm sorry, I just want a little bit of clarity here. You're saying not be able to use the phone. Are you saying
we have a problem with
in a classroom? I'm not permitted to use the phone at that time.
Right. But, we have problems where principals have reported that parents have gotten on cell phones and called people over because their child had the incident and bring more people over to the school. And we just want to make sure, like, as we vetting people that's working with our children, to make sure they don't, use a cell phone inappropriately. to make a phone call, just like we ask our children to do. They're volunteers inside our buildings.
Okay.
Okay, and the last thing, if an accident occurs, does it have anything about that inside here? Because say if a child get hurt, I don't if they're not qualified to they're not a medical doctor or something. If a child get hurt on our property, that them running to help that child, give us liabilities also.
Well, they're never going to be alone with a student. A BPS staff member would be there. So my expectation would be that BPS staff member would be the one tending to the kid.
Yeah, I just think that should be really written out, though. I know we understand that they can't be alone with a child or children. But if accident does occur, say in the playground or something like that, where they're working at, that the other person will be the person that will attend to that child or help that child.
Okay, we can, there's definitely language in the handbook, but we'll make sure that it's clear regarding accidents.
Okay, well, that's it for me. Thank you so much. This is a couple of concerns that I had.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Evans-Brown, if you'd like to have your question.
Sure. Just an observation. Thank you, Dr. Reynolds and Chief Zezanowski, for your presentation. I like the fact that you revamped the volunteer handbook. And part of that whole process, you do an orientation for volunteers, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. And so the concerns that people have rose today, I'm sure that that's part of the orientation. I do like the fact that we need to know a name of these people, not thorough background checks or whatever, but we need to know who they are. But more importantly, I think the volunteer program is necessary in this district, along with other large districts, because we just need, bodies, real bodies with people who have a real concern, a genuine concern about our children and the future of BPS. So thank you for the work that you guys are doing, and kudos to you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
May I voice a concern here?
Sure.
I'm concerned that because we don't have volunteers jumping in line to do in an enormous way. I'm concerned that as a volunteer, that if I need to use my phone, I'm not allowed to use my phone. I'm not an employee of the district. I'm a volunteer. I understand the classroom situation, but in general, I should be able to use my phone if I'm a volunteer. And I need to make a call to my family. I need to check on my kids calling me or my family's calling me. How do we put a restriction in that blocks a volunteer from being able to use their phone? That doesn't make sense to me. That doesn't sound like it's something as a volunteer that I would agree to do. What if my daughter calls me? I'm not supposed to use the phone. I got a kid at home. I'm not supposed to use the phone. So I want to be clear about the difference between an employee, because we don't control our employees that well, that they're not using phones or going on Facebook during the day. But we're expecting a volunteer not to be able to have access to their outside world when they're in the schools. I'm concerned about that. And so I really would like to talk the superintendent to have a conversation with the superintendent about that. We have to be very careful. And one of the things that I do remember conversation coming back from these meetings is that there were some things that you had in there that they felt was very restrictive, and people spoke up about it. And I'm sure if you had phone, not non-usage, you both are shaking your head, non-usage of phone while doing my very volunteer time, I'm not expecting them to get on and have conversations because they volunteering, but I am expecting them, if somebody calls them from their family, to be able to say, excuse me, I need to take this call and come back to it. There's a different thing. We're having a problem with our teacher aides and assistants using the cell phones. Staff within our buildings, our security using cell phones, teachers using cell phones. And we're going to focus in on volunteers that they can't use cell phone. We need to check that out. I have a concern about that. I want to make it as conducive as possible for people to volunteer in our schools. And I think we need to make sure that we honor and respect them, that they have lives too, that they have separated from their lives, not getting paid. And they come here to work, to volunteer 2 hours, and to tell them they can't use their, if a phone call comes in, that doesn't seem fair to me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Mr. Hurd?
Thank you again. I just wanted to respond to that. The reason why I say that is because we set expectations for our children, and we tell them they can't use their phones in classrooms and in the building. And we also said the same thing with our teachers, where we follow our code of conduct that they can't use the phones while in classroom in the buildings. And the only reason why I say the volunteers should follow the same thing, because if we're leading the way and trying to really pursue, and using our code of conduct, that it should be the same way. But I do believe that they should, like I said earlier, that if using safe places or outside the classroom, it would be fine. But if they're using it in front of students or talking on the phone, it's just an example that we set for our students, that we expect for them to follow the exact same rules and regulations that we set in place. So that was my concern, and just to make sure that the children that we really practicing what we're preaching and teaching. Thank you again.
I think, I feel confident that we'll be able to language it in a way where it's a win-win, where our families have access to be able to receive important calls from their families and others without it being disruptive to the learning environment. So I'm confident that we can take care of it in an adequate way. Board Member Hurd.
Thank you. I hear so many complaints about the variations in phone policies from building to building. And when they do go to the building, how can we regulate, what we're doing with our cell phone policies, and when one building allows, one building may not. So if we're going to, as a district, going to practice the exact same usage with our code of conduct, it should be variation over everyone, and even board members that's walking in the hallways. Thank you.
And this is but listen, this is why we have the new handbook, because for the first time we have a standardized process. The expectation is the same for everyone. So I really do appreciate the feedback, the questions from everyone.
All right. Thank you for your presentation, since there's no more questions. And we are going to now transition into the commissary discussion and update with Mr. Hills.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We'll bring the staff up.
Okay, thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Chairperson Shuda, committee members and board members. Appreciate the opportunity to update everyone on the commissary. So we're prepared for the next step moving forward. Admin, if you could put the first slide up. There we go. Thank you, Admir. So the Buffalo Public Schools has been in the process for several years of establishing a cook-chill commissary for centralized food service production for all of our Buffalo Public Schools, the charter schools and non-public schools that we service, and any other entities we service. In order to provide that and to make sure we've used our child nutrition service money efficiently, we've taken a long process of developing a plan to make sure that we have the best possible commissary. So we wanted to run through some of the issues that are currently in play and give you a status report. Next slide, please. When we're talking about the commissary and our ability to provide cook chill services and limit produce food and increase farm-to-table service and provide our children with variety and flavor and nutritional meals. It comes down to Superintendent's Goal 3 of prioritizing safety, security, and wellness by implementing the best-in-class safety, security, and wellness practices. Child nutrition is a cornerstone of child wellness. I'm going to invite Ruth Connor up to talk about currently our commissary situation, which we have currently a facility that's been in operation for almost 20 years, and some of the limitations on East Delavan that led us to looking at an RFP, locating another site that is right across the street on East Delavan and William Gator, and proposing a new build commissary there. So Ruth Connor is going to speak briefly about our current limitations.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you. I hope everybody's well. I do want to just shout out to Ramona Reynolds and her team for speaking of the volunteers, because without you guys, the Farm to School program on Saturdays would not be successful. The New York families, I can't say enough about the help that your team has given us. So thank you for that. To speak on the current limitations of our commissary, we have spoken about these before. We have limited to process foods with no capacity to prepare large quantity recipes. Currently, we have our staff situation throughout our district. We have some struggles going on with the ability of staff cooking raw products in 65 different locations. Whereas doing this from a central location will provide a lot of variety, but also safely, properly prepared food. Restricted to preparing cold items such as salads, party platters, sandwiches. This is really more for catering aspect. We are very limited on what we can do in our central commissary. We don't have a lot of space. Inadequate freezer, refrigerator, and dry storage space. I will stress freezer because the lack of, if you came to the commissary today, you would look in our freezer and wonder how we are operating successfully. We are very creative with strategic planning. I feel like we're playing Tetris on a regular basis. Inadequate parking lot with dangerous traffic patterns, significant issue. I went to work yesterday, there was 3 tractor trailers in our parking lot, while we also have pedestrians walking in a pathway, and there's also vehicles, and we're trying to get deliveries out. It's definitely unsafe. And the street access where we're located is very odd. It's not at the light. It's definitely, unfortunately, everybody feels like they should block the driveway, and it's an opportunity for accidents to happen. Limited capacity to process fresh produce and raw proteins. We have been doing some scratch cooking in small scale, trying to do some recipe development with farm to school items, and also trying to meet the needs of our culturally relevant group of students, but not just to those students, but also to expose our children to the culturally relevant items. Having a limited capacity to process these items is very restrictive to be able to do this for the whole district. We have been working on small scale recipes, but we definitely need the equipment, which we'll talk about for larger scale production.
Next slide, please, Admir. The Cook Chill Commissary, it is the way that food service is moving. Oakland, California just opened in 2018, the center, a $39 million facility in 2018 dollars that services 80,000 students each day. Portland School Districts also has had a Cook Chill facility. Jefferson County, Louisiana has just opened up one in the past year. So there are a lot of facilities using the Cook Chill model to allow for the safe distribution of scratch cooked food to schools, using cooking and then chilling it and then having it reheated at the schools. It allows for meals that would typically come in processed from U.S. Foods or Tyson or another distributor to actually not be as processed and to use more farm fresh ingredients and better nutritional impact and better flavor.
We actually, in 2015, myself and Matthew Quinn, one of my supervisors, toured the Minneapolis facility, and it was a very familiar scratch cooking facility with what we're looking to do with 200-gallon kettles and chill baths. So there's definitely a lot of people, and Chef Brigade actually has Oakland, a team in Oakland, California, where they have a new commissary, and we are very fortunate that Chef Brigade has joined our team as well. So the unlock potential, a safe and efficient access to the traffic pattern that we discussed. The new commissary and the layout of the commissary is created to be utilized in the most efficient manner possible. As what we're doing right now in our current location, we kind of took a situation and we made it work. Well, now we found out a lot of things that are not working. And the new commissary would have a separate receiving dock, a separate delivery area, separate parking area for staff, and pedestrian walkways. It's located right across the street where we are currently located, which is very beneficial to our current staff that are working at the commissary, which the majority of our employees take the metro. Efficient storage and movement of inventory. As I said, we have a full freezer right now. Being able to have the space to efficiently store and move product safely. And also, we do a lot of USDA distribution out of our central warehouse. We actually deliver every day to schools, and be able to have that staging space in a refrigerated location is a priority. Right now, we are, of course, making it work, but it's definitely a challenge. Scratch cooking, capacity for cooked chill service, ensuring recipe consistency and food safety. You can all make the same recipe at home, but it'll all taste differently. Whereas what I want to do in the commissary is make one solid recipe consistent with a chef and make sure that it's meeting the needs of nutritional requirements and also tastes consistent throughout the district. Scratch cooking on a larger scale for specific buildings and student populations, ergonomic and productive workstations and workflow. As I said, this commissary has been created to be the most current, up-to-date, and also generationally impactful for years to come. Community engagement opportunities, the excitement that I have regarding the facility where we can do classes and hold workshops, and I see students working with parents and coming to have classes and how to cook at home. The opportunity for the community engagement is huge. And part of the grant that we have just been awarded, which is just over $5 million, is a regional impact. What we will be able to do with the New York Farm to School program, which we are very successful with, we will be able to expand that throughout the region. So it's definitely, this grant is something that they wanted to do for a district that's going to be able to impact the area. So that's our goal. So thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Director Keller. Next slide, please. So over the past 2 years, there was about a year and a couple of months where there were bi-weekly meetings where the work was done to develop this location and site. So Executive Director Mel Alston is going to come up and discuss the process of arriving at this site plan.
Good evening, Board President and Board members. Before I speak specifically of the process, what I would like to report happily is that as a result of this process, we have a complete set of construction drawings and specifications designed for the intent of the Buffalo School Commissary on the site that was selected through the RFP process, which will facilitate the cook-chill method for our schools. It will be a 60,000 square foot building with all of the equipment properly placed. It will be on a site that will accommodate all of the vehicles, the large trucks, as well as the small vans, as well as the staff parking in a safe manner. It will allow for the flow of the food service commodities to and from the site, and it'll be on a site that will be easily accessible to all of the staff. The process was through the RFP to develop an extensive program for a building that's very unique. It's a very specialized building type. It's not something that you generally can find in existing buildings. This necessitated the design and the programming for a new building. There are a few buildings of this type being constructed around the country. This would be a legacy project for the Buffalo Public Schools. The programming process is very involved, so we had to have a number of people, specialists, including architects, engineers, food service consultants, and others, energy specialists, equipment specialists, come together on months of activity to get this program developed with this building. I can tell you that from my own experience in the design industry, this was a well-crafted, well-put-together building and design, and I think we can be very proud of what we have here. This building we could have shovels in the ground to construct this building very soon if we can get through this process. The drawings and specifications are ready to go, have been reviewed by the city as well as the state education department. So I just want to emphasize that these are the things that we've been working on. If this building is built, it would last for at least 40 years with this design that we've put together. Thank you.
Thank you, Executive Director Austin. Just want to say the continued and persistent service that Mel Alston has provided to the district is invaluable. The next slide, please. So the timeline to date. In June 20th, 2022, the district issued an RFP for a proposed new location for the central commissary. After extensive study of the existing site, there had been about 5 years of work. It was determined that we needed to do a new design, so that RFP was proposed. The September 8, 2022, the board resolution authorized the winner of the RFP to be the preferred developer and the district to negotiate a preferred developer agreement. As the discussion started with the architects, the design team, the developer, our food service staff, our district staff, our legal staff, as those discussions proceeded to design the facility, a designated developer agreement was executed on February 10th of 2023. September 20, 2023, due to the restrictions on a lease to purchase, which was part of the course we were pursuing, that state ed will not allow, according to regulations, a lease to purchase. We pivoted to a pursuit of a straight purchase and sale agreement to be negotiated with McGuire Development, and the city would take title to the building and the district would own the building. So that process was started of establishing with the city. All of the information was provided, working with their corporation counsel, working with their Department of Planning, working with the Department of Real Estate, working to get a purchase sale agreement. But it was, once we were able to get everything on the table in March 25 of 2024, the City of Buffalo provided technical assistance regarding the transaction that made the option of a purchase sale agreement through the city not feasible at this time. Next slide, please. So currently we have, as our audit of 6/30/2023, $39,596,000 in the U.S. Child and Nutrition Services Fund balance. That fund balance is over what we are allowed to carry, and it has been for a long time. Part of the design of this project was to mobilize that fund balance to support the new commissary. At some point, our Child and Nutrition Services will, there will be some kind of sanction for having that much money carrying over year to year in our fund balance. For child, and this is not our district fund balance, it's our Child and Nutrition Services fund balance. The existing lease of the commissary expires on August 31st, 2025. We do have written in our lease the ability to extend for 5 years. We can also go to the landlord and see if we can do something short of that, but the written into the lease is the unilateral ability for us to request a 5-year extension. We have to do it 180 days before the end of the lease. The current construction schedule for the construction documents prepared is 18 months, and the designated developer agreement that I mentioned was signed, that has expired, as well as many of the cost provisions that were established with the subcontractors. The current expenditures for architectural services design and development under the designated development agreement would be the responsibility of the district. So we have some cost in this for the cost of the architectural drawings, for the cost of everything involved that totals several $1 million. The district was awarded $5 million, $374,000 in federal funding to support farm fresh scratch cooking at the commissary. So there are funds to support this commissary. There are significant obstacles to a purchase sale agreement, as I shared. So the next slide, please. There are 2 paths forward, and they're not mutually exclusive. The first path is to secure authority from the Board of Education to negotiate a lease with no purchase option, as the district is not allowed to lease with an option to purchase per state regulations. This would require the negotiation of lease terms. That lease would then have to go through the process of state ed submittal. The prior review process for state ed would have been as a found building, which is the process for purchase, but the process for New York State Department or New York State Education Department facilities has to review this lease. Even though it's not for K-12 students, it has to be reviewed according to their standards. The other path is to reinitiate the procurement, design, and development process to satisfy the regulatory and statutory requirements for a purchase through the City of Buffalo. Restart to whatever extent is possible. That would essentially start with procurement, design. Everything that has been done to date would have to be redone in order to move forward. And to lay the foundation to make sure the technical issues raised by the City of Buffalo and any other regulatory and statutory elements are addressed. Both options would require that we extend the commissary lease. And the superintendents will review both options with the finance, legal, and operations team to make a recommendation through a resolution to the board. So in sum, that's where we're at. Jim, did you have anything to share? I was supposed to call you up between bullets 1 and 2 on this page, but.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Thank you, David. That's a great recap. As we view these 2 paths forward, I think it's important to understand that we embarked upon a very non-standard financial and funding structure based upon our desire to own the facility. And I think bumps in the road were inevitable or to be expected. The city is just the latest one. The state much prefers a straightforward lease. I'm talking, when I say the state food service financial team. We are engaged with state food service. There's an auditor assigned to this case. to discuss the situation of our excess fund balance and our plan to get it down. They know that he keeps reinforcing to me, you cannot buy anything with one dime of this surplus money. But he knows that our move to a much more expensive new facility and the pursuit of a cook-to-chill method and the transition cost are the essential parts of our plan to reduce that excess fund balance. So, which either path we take, we have to go through them as well. Thank you.
Thank you. And Counselor, so this is Mary's chance to say anything if I inaccurately portrayed it, but I think I got close.
I was going to say, yes, Chief Hills did present everything fairly and accurately in the presentation, and we can obviously answer other questions that arise.
Okay. So thank you, Chairperson Shuda and board members for this opportunity to discuss where we're at with the commissary and lay the groundwork for the superintendent's recommendation to the board.
Okay. Thank you very much for the recap. And I think that from my standpoint, it was pretty much a repeat of what we heard back in September. And I don't think anyone on the board does not understand the benefits of the new commissary. And I just think that what we're, what I'm looking for is to make sure the decision that is made has long-term fiscal responsibility for this district, and that we make sure that any decision that is made isn't made hastily, that in the long term that we'll regret. But I totally 100% support the mission of the new commissary and what is much needed. Does anyone else have any comments? Mr. Hurd?
Thank you, Chairwoman Shuda. Yes, just two questions. One thing we asked Mr. Hills were to look into the possibility of having a kitchen there for a community kitchen or a restaurant there that our kids can work in post high school to get the experience, and also help the community with the food needs that's over there in the food desert. Have that been looked into as of yet? I mean, we asked several times if this is a possibility.
So that's been considered. It is substantially incompatible with the design of the building, but we do incorporate students from the Buffalo Public Schools in the food service operations. There are students from OTC that are currently working in the commissary, and that will be, and it will also have the community kitchen. A restaurant per se would exceed our authority to operate. But
Can I add something? Can I
yes.
say it from here?
I'm
sorry, can you hear me from here?
Yes.
Should I go? Okay. I actually had a meeting today with Rob Harris from CTE, right? And we actually had a great meeting today to talk about training program for our students at the end of their junior year, going into their senior year for job opportunities within our department, because I feel like it's an area that has not been tapped into enough. And I spoke to him about going to speak to the students in the fall to try and encourage our kids to come and join our team, because I think there's a lot of career opportunity, myself included. I started 25 years ago as a manager in a school, not ever imagining that I would be in the position that I am today. As a Buffalo Public School graduate myself, I think that there's opportunity that we really need to share with our kids. And not necessarily a restaurant, but I do believe that there's an educational opportunity that we'll be able to share with our community and our parents and our students on a regular basis. I definitely am a big dreamer, and I do see a lot of opportunity here, very vested in the city of Buffalo, and this is definitely something that we are, I know financially there's definitely always that conversation, and it is priority for longevity, but
I mean, it's something that we're going to be impacting students every day for years to come.
Okay, it's just that, you know, our children are working this in the culinary arts, and, you know, a lot of times they don't have the outlet after high school to go pursue their careers. And I think that we should be obligated and be accountable if we can use this as an opportunity to give them job training outside of high school, and that they can use out in the world, you know, for their futures. And we should really be pushing that as we work with our CTE programs. The second question that I did have is that with the city of Buffalo, I know it was some confusion among the city of Buffalo and their personnel about how this commissary be built, the ownership of the land, who would be the building, the deeds, and so forth. Have those things been resolved?
Mary Scarpini will address that.
Board Member Hurd, I don't know if there was necessarily confusion on the city's part. What they had to do is review the whole procurement process that the district had gone through, which did not contemplate the purchase through the city originally. So that was really where that kind of came about in the issues that we ran into right now with doing a purchase under the current plan. So that's why we now have the two options that we do.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so that we have made this movement. Thank you so much, and thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Great presentation.
Mrs. McCutcheon?
Thank you, Board Member Shuda, and thank you for the presentation. I'm excited that we're having conversation about it, although I am super disappointed that the contract term ended and we are at a point of having to make some additional decisions because maybe confusion isn't the right word, but boy, oh boy, is bureaucracy a rough go, and it does slow things down tremendously. And I think we can all agree that that is certainly the space we were in. And as a result, tough decisions have to be made. I personally am not necessarily in favor of the lease option, although that is certainly a viable option, and I appreciate that being offered. I think, again, to Board Member Shuda's point, there needs to be some thought as we renegotiate what this looks like and we're moving things forward. And I think I'm piggybacking on some of my colleagues here with regard to the conversations with the city and what our options are. And if we had made headway and there's a clear understanding of what this process looks like now, which I'm hopeful that there is by this point, you know, that I would like to see those conversations furthered before we go into kind of that private lease opportunity. So I don't necessarily have a question outside of, you know, did we make enough headway this go round to understand exactly what the expectation would be moving forward, that if we were to have to go through this procurement process again, which you said we would, and I don't know what these technical issues might look like, but I think in the long run, there's a cost savings, even if we have to, you know, go through that process again.
Any more questions or comments? President Compton?
Thank you. I just want the board to remember that we just sat before the charter schools and they own both of their buildings. Okay. And this was proposed in 2019. At the time, the board asked a bunch of questions. We had Joe Giuliana, we had everyone all in front of us, and they said, this is very feasible, we can make it happen. I've known probably for 2 years that we could not do lease to owns based on the work that we were trying to do when we were looking at some other buildings to secure. And so I want to just read under what fiduciary responsibilities are. It includes to run the plan solely in the interest of participants and beneficiaries and for the exclusive purpose of providing benefits and paying plan expenses. So we have an opportunity here to back up and get this right so that our children can have a building using $39 million of the district's money that and kudos to Bridget O'Brien because she saved money for the district and earned it. There's no shovel in the ground. When you said that doing the city is not feasible at this time, I don't understand exactly what that means, but what I interpret it to mean is that it's going to require us to go back to the drawing board to start all over again. And we should be prepared to do that if we are about making sure that as fiduciaries that we're doing what's best with the money that's coming in this district. It's not as if this is going to be a significant delay, because we already were just told that we have to extend the lease in the building that we're in currently. I appreciate the presentation. However, the board, it did not necessarily, we did not need to be resold on anything associated with that commissary. So you could have saved our time with that one, because the board from day one, from 2019, has been on board with making this happen. What my concerns are here is that we are talking once again about empowering everyone except for the children in this district. And what it boils down to is, on the backs of the community, we are not putting forward a plan to make a difference in the lives of our school district. And so for me, I recommend we go back to the drawing board, get it right this time, and move forward. If the developer who we chose, the designated developer, its agreement has expired, if they end up going through the city's procurement process and they end up getting the deal, they do. But what we cannot continue to do is not empower our school district. We cannot. We're about to put a bunch of money over in Buff State. I don't know about you guys, but Madai looked real good to me. Okay, that campus looked real good to me. Okay, we have to have a plan, and that maybe it's because of my background. I'm a mortgage banker. I worked in real estate. Okay, I own real estate. That I rub pennies and make nickels out of them. I do not feel that we are fulfilling our fiduciary responsibilities if we don't make sure that there's a plan other than a lease in place for our children with this. And that's all I have to say on it. My vote in moving forward with this is that we start all over and get it right this time. Thank you.
If there's any more comments, we will then turn it over to Dr. Rivera.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. And then Dr. Rivera, you're going to be substituting for Vice President Scott. Thank you very much. And we will turn it over to you for an update in facilitating a discussion on the CGCS special education study. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for giving me the time to talk about something that I know is very close to all of our hearts, which is about making sure that our students with special needs, thank you, President, receive fair, equitable, and really best-in-class education. Because that's a lot of what we were talking about. And as I said during the last business meeting, the number of concerns, complaints, and issues regarding special education is clear not only when our speakers come to address us, but also in the daily interactions each of us has with our stakeholders. Special education affects real students and real families, as we all see regularly, and as I've periodically shared with my own child's experience, in fact, both of my children, one who has autism, the other who is medically fragile. We are emblematic, my family is emblematic of what parents in this district and students in this district go through. And again, I'm going to say one more time, what happens to those individual students matters to all of us because they are our students. They're not something separate. So we hear about this and we know the human cost of what happens when we have inefficient and inadequate processes in education for our students with disabilities. We know what happens to them. And I think it's fair to say that this entire board is unified in making sure that this works better for our students. What may not be known is the impact that that has on the district's budget and graduation rate. In addition, there is a terrible cost that's happening here. to our students as human beings that we would be remiss if we don't address, and also to our district in its own functioning, its budget, and its graduation rates, which also President Kottman just talked about fiduciary responsibility just in the last session, but also we've talked about over and over again about what it means to make sure that our budget is appropriate. And I would like to present for your consideration that part of the reason why we want to do this kind of work, even though it's hard work, is because when we do this, when we make these efficient processes, everybody wins. Because the students' needs are met, they get the kind of education that I know we are all dedicated to having our students have. The budget becomes more streamlined, which means we'll have more dollars to go towards students and the things that we need. And there's a whole host of other pieces that I'd like to take you through with this slideshow. So those are my opening remarks with this. And I'd like to see if I can cue up the slideshow that I've prepared for you. And I want to give you a little bit of background about this. Part of what has happened in our district is that we've undergone special education reviews before. And the last one was in 2014. There's some pieces here that can be a little confusing because there's a lot going on. And so what I wanted to do is I wanted to walk you through what was done, what impact that has, and what the suggestion before the board is. So to start with, the most recent major review was done by the Council of Great City Schools. This is public. It can be accessed on their website. You can read it for yourself. Each of you as board members have a copy. I reissued it to you. You also have a memo that I created that gives you a whole overview of it. If you could transition to the next slide, I'd appreciate it. Thank you. So just as a historical work, the original charge from the Buffalo Board of Education was to approve two committees by unanimous vote, the Buffalo Board of Education Review Committee on Special Education and the District Ad Hoc Review Committee on Special Education. I gave you a whole bunch of verbiage about it, but the bottom line of this is this. The Buffalo Board of Ed, that would be the review committee, is charged with looking at some of what happened in the past and giving some recommendations to the district review committee about how to move forward. Where should they start with reviewing this? And that's a big piece of what we're going to be talking about today is, where do we start? What should we look at? And my suggestion at its baseline is to simply start with where the last review left off. What the Council of Great City Schools did and identified, do a status update on that and what their recommendations were, and then we can move forward from there. Next slide, please. This is very much about bureaucracy, like Representative McAtkins said. Bureaucracy is a big piece of this. So I'd like to focus in on, before we start talking about why are we doing this way and what we should do, I want to give you a pitch on why do we need to do this and why now. Next slide, please. What you have before you is the percentages of where the Buffalo City School District BED's student with disabilities classification has been from 2014 through now. What you can see is we've had a slight increase in the number of students who were classified as students with disabilities since the Council of Great City Schools study was done. You can see that we're right in the same band. Why that's important is that that's one reason why this study is still current enough for us to consider as a starting point to look at where we go next for our students with disabilities. 22.4%, while not a majority in the district, is significant enough. So I want to remind folks that when we're talking about students with disabilities, there's a significant number of them in our district, which is why it's so important to focus in on this. Next slide, please. Thank you. I wanted to just give you a snapshot of some special education attendance and suspension data. What you will see here is, while it's not completely disproportional, you can see there's some areas of concern and need that makes this kind of review important. Because when we look at the functioning of special education in our district, it will have a direct effect, not only on the number of students classified, but also, well, and I should back up and say, the number of students classified erroneously. We want to be sure that students receive special education services when they need them and when it's appropriate, but also in suspension data and attendance data. We're already starting to go in a good direction. We want to capitalize on that. Next slide, please. Where we have some work to do, though, is about how we include our students with disabilities in least restrictive environments. So what you can see here on this slide, and it's a little small, but what the slide is talking about is students with 80% or more of the day in a general education program when they're identified as a student with special needs, students with 40 to 79% of the day in a general education program, and students with less than 40% of the day with the general education program. We did not quite meet state targets. Why is that important? That's important because what it shows is that there may not be enough supports in general education for our students with disabilities, our students with special needs, to allow that kind of least restrictive environment, which means the place where our students can function without too many restrictions. We may very well be referring out into a more restrictive environment that would be a classified special education setting. You've heard the terms, right? 511, 1211, 811, 611, etc. Looking at this says that we have some work to do in this area. And there are pieces of the Council of Great City Schools report that directly address this. Next slide, please. We see a similar trend for our students with preschool in a least restrictive environment. The importance is still the same, and I would argue that the importance is very high in students who are preschool age, because it's the very beginning of their educational journey, and it's going to affect everything else that comes after. Next slide, please. So I've thrown you a snapshot of data as a way to argue for the importance of this. How will this help students with disabilities, and how will it help our district? Next slide, please. In a couple different ways. If we enact a review of special education, it will do a few things. It will address the correlation between low academic achievement and graduation rates in individual schools with a high special needs population. The answer is not to keep moving students around. The answer is to meet their needs where they're at. If we do that, academic rates, academic achievements, graduation rates will rise. The other piece is to address a suspension rate that is disproportional for students with disabilities versus their neurotypical peers. We can do things in such a way that we address problematic behavior and put supports into place so that it doesn't get to the point of a suspension. It doesn't mean no suspension, but it does mean reducing them, which also means we increase the amount of time that students are in classrooms, and we increase the amount of their learning time. And when we talk about students with special needs, time in is critical because regression occurs otherwise. It will help to increase access to supports in a least restrictive environment, which decreases loss of functioning, which decreases behavioral issues, and referral to more restrictive placements. When we put the right supports for our staff, for our teachers, for our students in classrooms, it's going to decrease all of those indicators. It will help to prevent burnout in our staff. When we work efficiently, we are not over demanding on folks who are on the front line. They will have appropriate supports. And there will be better communication to help streamline things so there's less time chasing after problems once they become too big. There will be a more proactive approach. And prevent issues that really, again, as I opened up, I can't emphasize this enough. These have a staggering human and financial cost. It's really, really critical that we do this. Next slide, please. This work was already started for us in 2014 by the Council of Great City Schools. Next slide, please. The Council of Great City Schools was commissioned to create a special education report in May 2014. I was actually one of the parents interviewed at the time. I remember when they came. It was approved by the Buffalo Board of Education at the time, and the purpose was to help improve the special education services across the school system. Next slide, please. The report provided technical assistance and focused on a couple of areas, and I want to really emphasize these areas because I've organized their recommendations, their report on what our strengths were then and what our areas of improvements were in these kind of 4 buckets: special education demographics, referral, classification for services, and placement. That's kind of all put together, which is that when you have a student in need, examining the student's records, seeing if you need to make a referral for special education, doing the testing, seeing if the student needs to be classified as a student with disability, and then determining what placement level they're at. It's a big piece of all of this. Then the next big bucket is general education interventions and support. The next big bucket is teaching and learning for students with IEPs. And remember, students with IEPs are not just in self-contained classrooms. They are in general education classrooms as well. And support for teaching and learning for students with IEPs. It's a nice organizational structure. Let me start talking through what they found. Next slide, please. They found a fair number of strengths. They found that in general, our CSE process was an area of strength. They found that our agency collaborations was an area of strength. And I want to remind everyone, this was in 2014. And they found that inclusive education at the time was meeting that 53% target. In general education interventions and supports, they found that our reading curriculum at the time in integration of math and literacy approaches was a strength, that our data collection practices, so what we knew and gathered about our students, were an area of strength. Our PBIS resources, our code of conduct, and the fact that we have nurses in every school and agency partnerships for mental health, all areas of strength. In the area of teaching and learning for students with IEPs, instruction and related services, graduation and dropout rate, and post-secondary transition services to fulfill the CDOS mandate at the time it was just coming through, the career credential was coming through, were all good things. Supports for teaching and learning for students with IEPs, the integrated co-teaching and supports for teachers was listed as an area of strength, and the MTSS framework, the idea that we are going to put different supports in with students and watch how they respond to them. All areas of strengths. Next slide, please. There were opportunities for improvement, and there were a fair number of them in the area of referral and placement. Services, placement, and outcomes for preschool-aged children was an area that was cited that we could improve it. General placement of school-aged children outside of an inclusion setting, particularly for individuals with intellectual disability, emotional disturbance, and learning disability, could be improved. The provision of supports and services for students as a part of the placement process could be improved. Referral of students to special education instead of creating enough intensive supports in education was a place that we could be improved. And what they're basically saying is we needed more intensive supports in general education to avoid that referral. and only have referrals when it's really necessary. The use of referral to separate schools in order to address lack of sufficient resources to support student needs. And what they're talking about there is a case where a student doesn't get the resources they need. A student with a disability does not get resources. And then they start to show signs of struggling academically, behaviorally, and then the immediate answer is, well, obviously this is a student who needs a more intensive setting, and so we'll do a referral to special education. It's not always so. It depends on the situation. We have to treat that very carefully. The placement of students in self-contained programs, you can see the theme. This was an area of improvement all the way through. And then information and support for student needs as a part of placement. And I can speak to this as a parent who's gone through placement twice now. You need a lot of support with this. There's a lot of jargon. There's a lot of complicated things, and it can be a very emotional time. And then also just knowing what all of the resources might be available to you. It's a lot to deal with, and it's a lot to process. And the more that we equip our parents and our caregivers early, the better. In the area of general education interventions and support, they said we could improve in our interventions and support for children with both IEP and ENL needs, interventions and support for secondary grade students, and suspensions of students with IEPs. Next slide, please. There were more. In the area of teaching and learning for students with IEPs, the achievement of school-age students with IEPs, special education options for students who are identified as ENL or ELL and have an IEP. In other words, there's not enough settings for folks who have both of those. And access to a full day extended school year with consistent staffing and location, because consistency is huge for our folks with special needs. And again, more time in, you see more achievement. And then finally, support for teaching and learning for students with IEPs, guidance, criteria, and achievement for ICT settings, information and support for student needs as a part of instruction, support and accountability for assistive technology, so that technology that works for our students and with our students. We need more support and accountability needed. Access to transportation, to alternate sites of instruction when mandated, because this is a real issue for some of our folks with special needs. Transportation can be an enormous barrier. It is for all of our students too, but for our students with special need, there's an additional layer. Post-secondary transitions and supports, in other words, what kind of support you're going to get moving out of secondary, and professional development for all school leaders regarding special education needs and best practices. That second piece is really critical. So I'm going to move on to their recommendations. If you could, next slide, please. Thank you. In the area of referral and placement, remember there were some significant areas of improvement that they identified. They recommended that we improve consistency, appropriateness, and timeliness of eligibility determinations. In other words, how we determine that students need special education services, and hold staff members accountable for making sure that happens. Ensure that there are sufficient numbers and types of special education and related services personnel at schools and at the central office. They saw an area of need there, because if we have those two things, that's going to help with a lot of the referral and placement pieces that were cited as areas of improvement. And then in general education interventions and supports, they recommended that we communicate broadly about the special education process and resources to promote student achievement and social emotional well-being and meaningful parent, and I'm going to add, just as an editorial aside, student participation. The ways in which that our families, our caregivers, and our students are connected to their buildings and the folks in their buildings and their peers makes a huge difference in student persistence. Next slide, please. Two more buckets for recommendations. In teaching and learning for students with IEPs, they recommended that we expand options for inclusive school programming for young children with IEPs. To improve meaningful and effective instruction and supports in inclusive settings, to improve instruction meant to accelerate the achievement and social emotional well-being of students in self-contained or specialized classes, to reduce reliance on this setting. Because the thing to remember, and I like the Council of Great City Schools report in this way, what they're pointing out is just because you're in a more restrictive setting at one point in your school career doesn't mean you always stay there. It is designed to have folks move in and out as their level of need changes. Support for teaching and learning for students with IEPs. Improve support for teaching and learning for students with IEPs with recommended organizational changes for special education and a cabinet level position. The chart that Council of Great City Schools provided is in the report that you received in your email today. And for the public, it is on the Council of Great City Schools website. All you have to do is search Buffalo Special Education. Communicate clear expectations for school leadership chiefs and accountability for the administration and operation of special education at the school level. Those clear expectations are really important. We can't ask people to perform unless they know what those expectations are. Identify a project manager to report to the cabinet to support the review and execution of these recommendations. Ensure that MTSS is evidence-based and implemented with fidelity. It's a good model. They said it was one of our strengths, but it has to be implemented with fidelity in all school buildings. And reduce out-of-school suspensions for students with disabilities. Next slide, please. So where does this leave us? This is a report from 2014. And I've made an argument that a lot of the conditions are still there, but also that the board should know what's happened between then and now so we know where to go next and what next set of improvements can be made. And so an assessment, I'm asking the board to consider requesting that the superintendent direct the district ad hoc committee or other entity chosen by Dr. Williams to create and present a report that includes, in essence, a status report and a point in time report on these items, and especially those buckets that I took you through, on these items in special education. So a comparison between the 2014 data and the current data, what's actually changed. Progress on the stated opportunities for improvement from that report. Progress on recommendations from that report. The status of changes made in response to developments in special education law since 2014, because things have changed. Changes made in response to best practices since 2014. Current areas of strength in identification, assessment, placement, student conduct and behavior, and transition for students with disabilities, and the current opportunities for the same, and a plan that includes implementation based on this updated data, progress, recommendations, changes, and opportunities for improvement. As a part of this, we must have community sessions. I would argue we must have community sessions to elicit feedback on the plan and the implementation, and then action items and associated timeline. It's easy to lose track of important things. As I started this presentation, I want you to consider how important this is, how critical this is. And if we have action items and an associated timeline, we'll see how this moves forward. That's the end of the slideshow. You can take it down and I can open it up for discussion. Thank you.
Madam Chair, this is Will. Just to clarify, because it might be helpful for your colleagues to know what we had discussed earlier regarding your expectations for June.
Yes.
So the staff will be preparing kind of a status update on the dozen recommendations that you referenced before. So that's something that you had said you wanted to see, and the superintendent discussed that with the staff. So that is something that will be for the June 5th committee meeting.
And I look forward to it. Thank you very much for including that. President Cotman, I believe your hand was up.
First of all, I want to say thank you so much. This is excellent. It's thorough, and certainly you know what we need and how we need to get it done. I appreciate that. In addition to next month, do you think that they can also provide the 5-year plan that they've been telling the principals they've been working on, so that we can not only look at what they, the comparison of 214, but what they're doing now, since the principals are telling me that there's a 5-year plan that's determining the amount of classrooms that are being changed.
Yes.
This is what they're telling me they're being told by staff, okay? And so if they have a 5-year plan, or you're just arbitrarily moving school classrooms around or whatever, but I'd like to see that 5-year plan. I've heard 2 principals say that was shared with them when they asked questions about why was my classroom or taken away or changed or whatever. And they said, oh, it's part of our 5-year plan. And so if it doesn't exist, it should never have been said that to the principal. But if there is something that justifies how you're moving special ed children around, certainly I'd like to see it in writing. So, but other than that, you knocked the ball out the park, Ann.
Well, thank you
so much.
You're most welcome. And I agree with you. I would like to see a 5-year plan. I believe Chief Fathertelli has a response to that. And then I will move on to Representative Shuda.
Hi, thank you so much. We're actually very pleased to be able to give you an update in June. I think it'll be really important for the community to see, based on these recommendations, what actions have taken place. So I think it's a great opportunity. Just for clarification, and Mrs. Cotman, I'm happy to talk to you offline. I don't know what's being referenced by the 5-year plan, so I would love to talk to you later and maybe get a better understanding of what you're referencing.
Yes, thank you. My principals told me that when they asked questions about why classes were being removed and changed in their building, they were told that it's part of the 5-year plan. And so that's where it came from. And so, I'm just throwing it out there that I don't know how, well, maybe if you don't have a 5-year plan, maybe you can tell us how you determine how you're going to take a classroom out, how you're going to change a classroom. How are you determining what schools should get these classes or whatever? So there has to be some plan. Someone's making a decision. They're looking at a board and just saying that I want to move that to that or whatever. So I'd like to know more about the inner workings and the minds of your staff as they change, certain schools almost over to large percentages, and why some schools, such as the South District, who was asking for certain children, are not getting any classrooms over there. So that was brought to my attention also. So thank you. Appreciate it.
No problem.
Thank you. Ms. Shuda.
I'm just looking for some historical knowledge from 2014. How were these findings conveyed to the board? And do you know if the board discussed those? And so I'm really kind of concerned, did we have a corrective action plan with the district when we had these findings?
No, I'm sorry, I interrupted.
No, you're not interrupting at all. I'm just wondering, so this document sat from 2014 with these recommendations?
I don't know. I don't know what the board saw because I was a parent in the district at the time. So I know, President Cotman, you have something to say about it? No. Okay, the board did not see it. Yes? Okay. The board did not see it. What I do know is that.
Who saw it? Who saw it? Who was?
Honestly, all I can contribute, and then I'll turn it over to some of our district colleagues, and maybe they can give you some more information. What I knew as a parent was that the Council of Great City Schools was requested to come and review special education by the then superintendent. And they did a thorough review. I have no idea what happened to it after that. I don't know if there was a corrective action plan from the state. I they had indicated that's not why this was being done. This was just being done in the spirit of improvement. So that's unfortunately, that's all I know about it. I don't know if any of our district partners who are online knew anything more about this and
Can
where
I
it went.
ask, I can't even recall who the superintendent was in 2014.
Madam Chair, what might be helpful is we'll go back and check the minutes of the board throughout that time period, and we'll see what references there are to the requesting of the study, who was superintendent, and so forth when the study was finally produced, and we'll get that information to you. So we'll try to dig up some of those answers.
Thank you. I think those are great questions. I really do.
Right. I think like a 10-year lapse, it's kind of shocking to me, but maybe there's more background. Thank you.
Yeah, me too. So thank you very much for that. I appreciate it. Dr. Evans-Brown, I believe you were next.
I am. Thank you, Dr. Rivera, for such a robust presentation. I'm so glad that you picked up this Council of Great City Schools package and dusted off, blew the dust off 10 years later.
Indeed.
Because it's relevant in 2024. Yeah. I remember I was working on my doctorate at the time and finishing it up, and special ed was the same as it is today. And what I mean by that is one of the research topics that I thought was critical was having not just special ed teachers trained, but general ed teachers trained in the area of special ed. They don't do this in colleges and universities. And I don't know, and you can correct me, I don't think they do it today. I think that it's important that general ed teachers and instructors get similar training that special ed teachers get. I think that would reduce some of the assessments of students who have, special needs versus just putting them in special ed without the knowledge base. I like the fact that, well, let me back up. When you talk about 22% of our students who are in special ed, that's a lot of students.
It is.
We're talking thousands of students. So this is an issue that does need to be addressed. And I thank Dr. Cresses for looking into some of the execution of that time and where we need to go with this. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for your comments. I appreciate them. Mr. Hurt.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rivera, for really bringing this back to our attention and getting this data together for us in this presentation. It really means so much. And as we talk about our marginalized students and students without voices, or students that, or departments that we try to equip our educator with the proper tools so they be successful with our kids. But we know this, the mindset has to change, and the way we educate and the way we look at, our students as a whole, and the families. The families are so important that we address those issues also with the families, so that the children get the proper help that they need to help them be the most successful. And it affects a large portion of our diverse students also in the Buffalo Public Schools. So I'm looking forward to next week and next month and seeing how we can move this, how we can really work with this data, and also, like I said, achieve more data and see where is needed and where we can place supports, that's needed the most. I know you mentioned your children at the beginning, and I mention my brother all the time, that I take care of, that I'm in charge of, and he's older than me, but he was left to me, and still, through all these years, the level of care and concern never goes away. It's here for your entire life and the parents' entire life. So just the infrastructure for them to be able to work with them and plan for them, the best for them, it means everything. So just thank you and continue on with your work, please.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And I agree with you wholeheartedly. When we support our students with disabilities well, it is transformational for them, for their families. It really makes a huge difference because, as you said, the care never goes away. You know, we're still invested. So thank you for that. I appreciate it. Ms. Woods.
I'm looking at that. This is a wonderful study, a 10-year-old study.
It's old.
Yeah. And what I didn't get elected to the board till 2016.
Mm-hmm.
And the time period that I have been on the board, the information and the stats that I have been given was that the fastest growing area of expense and staff in the Buffalo schools was the special ed population, adding extra teachers so that there's two teachers for these students to try to give them the care that they need. That was where we were putting significant resources, and that it was the biggest area of growth. I can remember Jeff and the previous superintendents pointing out that something needed to be done to assess the students so that, as you were saying, they weren't put in they were put in the least restrictive environment rather than put in the 611 and just throwing resources at it. We needed a better plan because a lot of children were put unfairly. Now this is from the recent experiences, because I'm newer to the board, that children, especially minority students, were put into the special ed classes because maybe they were a little hyperactive, because parents were told they would get extra resources and financial benefits, that it was a significant problem that needed to be looked at because our children were being, for a better word, railroaded into special ed, whether they really needed that or not. And the school system couldn't bear the cost of mishandling these children. And more importantly, the loss of these children's potential and addressing what they really needed. They were going in and never coming out. That's all I've heard from people who and parents who were really concerned about their children. I have a nephew who is autistic. He is brilliant. And if we give him the resources that he needs and not just put him in a class where he is a 611 and mimics people, if you address it right, he doesn't need to stay in a special ed class and he wouldn't need all these additional resources. So I'm just saying, yes, this is an expensive area because it has been mishandled and the children are going in and not getting out and never coming out. So yeah, I do feel we need to address this and make a difference in the lives of the children and in the faster for us rising costs for this sector. So I'm very interested in looking at how we address this and that 5-year plan that we've been hearing about.
So I hear what you're saying, and I appreciate particularly the last thing you said, which is that we want to pair the appropriate amount of resources to what the students' needs are. That's what we want to do. We want to make sure that the resources we put in are being used well and they have the student outcomes that we want. I really, I think that's the most important thing here. I do want to make sure that we're really clear because I understand what you're saying, but there's been some narrative around about students with special needs taking away resources from other students. That's not what we're talking about. Students with special needs unable to ever graduate if they go into a self-contained classroom. That's also not what we're talking about. It's terrible if it happens. We want to make sure it never happens, because that we want to pair exactly what you said, right? Resources and outcomes. We want to
I
make
want to
sure
see our minority children move forward and not be stuck in those classrooms.
So I just, forgive me. This is one of the things that I feel really strongly about. So I appreciate you hearing me out about this. You know, some of our folks with disabilities who are also minority children, you know, my own son's an example of one of these, is that he needed to be in a self-contained classroom in order to get the local diploma and graduate. So that's why I'm pushing that one piece a little hard here, which is that resources and outcomes. What I hear you saying is we do not want to put students in classrooms where they are not going to be successful and have poor outcomes, correct? Okay, good. Thank you, Ms. Woods. I appreciate that.
Madam Chair, it's Will. Maybe I could just add, though, just some context and clarification. And I certainly appreciate your comments, Board Member Woods. But without question, and I know Dr. Williams would give you the same assurance, special education educators in our district every day are working to provide their students with the tools and opportunity that they need to overcome the effects of their disability so that they can be successful in their classes and be integrated throughout the general education population as much as they are able. So I think we're all on the same page with wanting the same thing. The one thing I might caution against is describing a classroom, you know, for special education students as a place where students they're stuck in. That's not the frame of mind that we, you know, certainly want our students to experience or our parents to think is the destiny for their child. So that's not really a match with what's going on in our schools with really dedicated teachers and administrators who want great outcomes, just like we all do around this table tonight. So just wanted to give that perspective. And I think we all want the same thing, but you know, how we describe what, you know, the circumstances right now, I think is really important.
I agree with you, and I appreciate that, especially since, you know, prejudice really does exist with folks with disabilities. And we want to be sure that we're always really clear that our students with disabilities are able to achieve, they are. And that when we appropriately support them, pairing those resources, you know, the right resources in the right places, they can do wonderful things. And so I think that's a
that was
really
well said. Thank you for that.
Oh, absolutely. I have two hands on my list, and I wanted to see if there's follow-up comments or they just happen to still be up there. President Cotman, one of them is yours.
I just had a question. Are we presently sending any children out for services? Like at one time we were using Falk. Are we still using that, sending children out? We are?
Yes, we still have agency placements.
Yeah.
I'd like to have an idea of what that looks like in our district as well. And I'd like to echo what you said, Dr. K and we are, the teachers, I've been in classrooms, and the things that teachers are trying to do and changes that they're trying to make in the lives of this certain population is astronomical. And one of the things that was listed here was burnout. And I think that we need to incorporate, moving forward, a day somehow or another where we allow our teachers who are dealing with, you know, that population, like some sort of respite or something, where they are allowed, even if it's just a day where they're allowed to, you know, do something and acknowledge them, because it's difficult, and it's very difficult. And I often tell people, please make sure that your child can respond or can carry out a request within 2 instructions, not 3, 4, 5, because a lot of this is conditioning. You know, if you don't follow a request within 2 or 3 responses, people start looking at you. In our household, it was one request. My mother would say, "Did you hear me?" to give us the benefit of the doubt. And so we learned well to follow instructions at an early age. And sometimes I wonder if it's not just pure conditioning to our children who have not been taught to handle, to listen and follow instructions. So I'm so excited about this. This is great work to be doing for the spring. It's great work. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I'll just add my pitch, piggyback my pitch right on the back of what you said, which is that the special education teachers that I know and I have seen in action are some of the most amazing human beings I have ever met. And there's too many to name that have been blessings to us. Okay, Ms. Shuda, your hand is still up. Did you have a follow-up comment? Oh, I'm
I'd
sorry.
like to echo the great work that the special ed teachers are doing in many settings. I had the opportunity as a principal to see many students go to a less restrictive environment due to the hard work and the expertise of these teachers. So I'd like to just reiterate that. And I just think that once we go back and we take a look, I'm sure there were some things put in place, and I look forward to seeing what during the last 10 years has improved, because I'm sure that someone had to look at that report and do something. Thank you.
I would agree with you. Thank you. I share that with you, Mr. Hurd. You had your hand.
Yes, thank you again. I just wanted to really on that what the board president said about our teachers needing breaks, especially our special ed teachers. I recently visited a school to where it was one of our students was running down the hallway and the teacher was chasing them, and so and the principal took me around and we went to a couple of classrooms and I just seen the quality of work that these teachers putting into a class with children with special needs, and as you know, and just the retention information when they tell the child, you know, it's not good to run down the hallway, we can't do that, and you promise me you won't do that again, and the child runs and does it again, and the teacher, you know, was an older teacher, and she was constantly chasing this child down the hallway to keep him in the classroom, and he would run through the door. But I'm not saying that because it's to talk about the child, but I'm saying that because our teachers do face burnout, and they are, you know, day to day, you know, every day working with children with special needs, and the parents also. I just want to rate the parents that we really need to bring them more into the focus also, because most of the child's education is at home. So what can we do, you know, to help those resources and bring those in? So I want to end it there, but I just think as a district, you know, we always try to do more. We always trying to see how we can have a better effect on that child's lives, and that family lives. So I just thinking we can just think of plans and just reach out to those parents also as we work in the future.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So I also appreciate the consensus that we have here to move this work forward, as well as the willingness of our district partners to do this and move this forward. It's really important work. It's nice to see that everybody really feels the same way. It's meaningful. Are there any other questions before we end our work session tonight? On time. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone. Have a lovely night. Get out and enjoy the nice weather if you can.
Thank you. It's still daytime.
It is.
Good night. Yes, the sun is still out. Good night.
Good night, all.